Good morning, everyone.
Good morning.
Thank you for coming out on this cold and frosty morning. May I introduce you to Stuart Kelly, who's going to be taking service today. About intimations here, tea and coffee will be served after the service. Please stay if you're able to. Coffee rota is in the vestibule for anyone who is able to help serving coffee after the services for the next 4 months.
Thank you. Thank you. It's lovely to be back here. It's been a while, but as I say, it's always good for us to go and see other churches and how things are done differently. So thank you indeed. Our opening words are from the Gospel according to John. Jesus said, "I am the light of the world. No follower of mine shall walk in darkness. They shall have the light of life." And the collect. Merciful God, grant to your faithful people pardon and peace, that we may be cleansed from all our sins and serve you with a quiet mind. Through Jesus Christ our Lord, who is alive and reigns with you and the Holy Spirit, one God, now and forever. Amen. Our opening hymn is number 264, Judge Eternal, Robed in Splendor. Our prayers of adoration and confession. Lord, who is beyond us, but made yourself understandable to us. Lord, who became one of us and taught us and redeemed us. Lord, who's here today as Spirit and inspiration. We reply, we are here. We are your people, broken vessels though we are. We are the people who can witness the grandeur and spectacular nature of creation and turn our eyes and shoulders the very next minute when we see need. We thank you because your overwhelming love was unnecessary, your grace unbidden, and your persistence a source of solace and hope and the way that we might become better. Because we have not been our best selves. We have been snide and stubborn, fixed and not flexible, stuck in our ways and not willing to change. We have let you down, and we have let ourselves down. We do not deserve your grace, and it is in adoration and confession that we confront you and confront ourselves. You are greater than we can imagine, and we are frailer than we admit. Lord, have mercy on us as we reflect in all the ways in which you might brighten us, polish us, and burnish us in the coming days. Having reflected in our hearts about our failings, and with our earnest thanks, we join in our family prayer which you taught us, saying, Our Father,
who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our debts as we forgive our debtors. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. For thine is the kingdom, and power, and glory forever. Amen.
Just a brief reflection before we have our readings from Corinthians and from Matthew. Christmas seems long over, and I have come to one conclusion, which is that the only films I really like are black and white films. I've never seen any of the Fast and the Furious. I didn't even bother with the new Star Wars or the new Star Trek film. The collect says that we should serve you with a quiet mind. And there's something about black and white films that I think is appropriate to have a quiet mind, something slower, gentler often. So I sort of vowed I'm only going to watch black and white films this year. For example, I watched Eisenstein's Battleship Potemkin, which is a pretty challenging film. I watched Arthur Hitchcock's version of The 39 Steps, which is far better than other versions that I've seen of that film. I watched Kind Hearts and Cornets, and I know where I'm going. And there's one film which has really, really stuck with me. It's the film Harvey, with the inimitable James Stuart. Now, if you don't know the plot, it's quite simple. He plays Elwood P. Dowd, and his family is trying to get him put into a lunatic asylum. Partially because he spends too much time in bars, and partially because his best friend is a giant, invisible, white rabbit called Harvey. How he knows the rabbit's white when it's invisible is not a point of the plot that's ever explained. But I've watched that film several times, and the more I watch it, the more I think it's actually theologically and religiously a very sophisticated, clever film. I won't try and impersonate James Stuart, so don't worry, but one line which I loved in it is when he says to the psychiatrist, I've wrestled with reality for 35 years, Doctor, and I'm happy to state I finally won out over it. This part, I think, gets to the heart of what we should be doing. He says, and I sit in the bars, have a drink or two, play the jukebox. And soon the faces of all the other people, they turn towards mine and they smile. And they're saying, we don't know your name, mister, but you're a very nice fellow. Harvey and I warm ourselves in all these golden moments. We've entered as strangers, soon we have friends. And they come over, and they sit with us, and they drink with us, and they talk to us. They tell us about all the big, terrible things they've done, and all the big, wonderful things they'll do. Their hopes, and their regrets, and their loves, and their hates. All very large, because nobody ever brings anything small into a bar. And then I introduced them to Harvey. He's bigger and grander than anything they offer me. And when they leave impressed. The same people seldom come back, and that's envy, my dear. There's a little bit of envy in all of us. Now, he's talking about being in a pub. But that idea that people can bring their problems and their hopes and their desires, and that we can smile to them, and that we can tell them about something much bigger and more remarkable than anything, strikes me as something that we should be doing. The other quote I want to give you from that film is one which has pertinence to the readings we'll hear, particularly from the readings from Corinthians. And James Stuart, as Elwood P. died, says, years ago my mother used to say to me, she'd say, in this world, Elwood, you can be oh so smart, or oh so pleasant. Well, for years I was smart. I recommend pleasant. You may quote me. As somebody who has been smart for a great many years, let me tell you, there's nothing as stupid as a clever person. Thank you. And we'll now hear from Corinthians and from Matthew.
Our first reading is 1 Corinthians chapter 2, verses 1 to 12. As for me, brothers, when I came to you, I declared the attested truth of God, without display of fine words or wisdom. I resolved that while I was with you, I would think of nothing but Jesus Christ. Christ nailed to the cross. I came before you weak, nervous and shaking with fear. The word I spoke, the gospel I proclaimed, did not sway you with subtle arguments. It carried conviction by spiritual power, so that your faith might be built, not upon human wisdom, but upon the power of God. And yet I do speak words of wisdom to those who are ripe for it, not a wisdom belonging to this passing age, nor to any of its governing powers, which are declining to their end. I speak God's hidden wisdom, his secret purpose, framed from the very beginning to bring us to our full glory. The powers that rule the world have never known it. If they had, they would not have crucified the Lord of glory. But in the words of Scripture, things beyond our seeing, things beyond our hearing, things beyond our imagining, all prepared by God for those who love him. These it is that God has revealed to us through the Spirit. For the Spirit explores everything, even the depth of God's own nature. Among men, who knows what a man is, but the man's own spirit within him? In the same way, only the Spirit of God knows what God is. This is the Spirit that we have received from God, and not the spirit of the world, so that we may know all that God of his own grace has given us. And our second reading is Matthew chapter 5, verse 13 to 20. You are salt to the world, and if salt becomes tasteless, how is its saltness to be restored? It is now good for nothing but to be thrown away and trodden underfoot. You are light for all the world. A town that stands on a hill cannot be hidden. When a lamp is lit, it's not put under the meal tub, but on the lampstand, where it gives light to everyone in the house. And you, like the lamp, must shed light among your fellows, so that when they see the good you do, they may give praise to your Father in heaven. Do not suppose that I have come to abolish the law and the prophets. I did not come to abolish, but to complete. I tell you this, so long as heaven and earth endure, not a letter, not a stroke will disappear from the law until all that must happen has happened. If any man therefore sets aside even the least of the law's demands and teaches others to do the same, he will have the lowest place in the kingdom of heaven. Whereas anyone who keeps the law and teaches others, so will stand high in the kingdom of heaven. I tell you, unless you show yourselves far better men than the Pharisees and the doctors of the law, you can never enter the kingdom of heaven. Amen. Thanks be to God.
Thank you. We're going to sing together hymn 97. O God, you search me and you know. May the words of my lips and the meditation of our hearts be fitting unto you, my God, my rock, and my Redeemer. I should have said, I forgot to say, that right at the end of Howden, there's a scene where the psychiatrist finally says, you know, he's here. And at that point, the gates of the hospital open. And I think that's something that we see in the readings today, about the liberation that's possible. But what I want to talk about today is Corinth. And I've given some sheets out. I don't know if you've all got them. You can pass them around. You can even take them home and call them in. There's more here if you need them. Have a look at them, and I'll ask you in a bit if you know what they are. Just as you're looking at it, I thought I would lead with a few bits from the other reading for today was from Isaiah 58, and it seemed pretty appropriate. He says, he talks about the fact that the workers are being oppressed. And he says, why on earth do we bother fasting, given that we don't do the right thing? And right at the end it says, the ancient ruins will be restored to your own kindred, and you will build once more on ancestral foundations. You shall be called rebuilder of broken walls, restorer of houses in ruins. So, what do we know about Corinth? I visited Corinth, although in truth I haven't visited Corinth. Corinth was destroyed by Julius Caesar, then it was destroyed by an earthquake, and the place that's now called Corinth is actually New Corinth. But I was there and I saw the Temple of Apollo and went on to go around southern Greece. Corinth is on an isthmus. It's the link, the bridge, the crossroads between Achaia in the north, Britain's got Athens, for example, and the Peloponnese in the south. And it was a trading port. It was a very politically canny, very politically savvy city. It would side with Athens, or Thebes, or Sparta, as suited their own best interest. And let's go back and have a look at the columns. There's the Doric column, the simplest one. The Ionic, that's got little curves. And then the fancy one, that's the Corinthian column. Corinth was lavish. It was known particularly for a group of people called hetaeras, which were effectively temple prostitutes. Some of them commanded absolutely vast sums of money. And I think that's why when we read Paul's epistle to the Corinthians, he's concerned about sexual morality. Not in the kind of finger-wagging way that we sometimes think. But he knows that this city makes a lot of money from the exploitation of women. Although the extent to which they also exploited the men might be a debatable point. The Roman Pope Horace says, not without some irony, Non licet omnibus adire Corinthian. Not everyone is allowed to go to Corinth. But that he really meant not everyone can afford to go to Corinth. It was also a military, or rather a naval power. They created the Trinity, 3-decker ships. And so it became quite an important, significant force in terms of the various wars that were going on through Greece. And Corinth was so famous, it gave its name to a verb, to Corinthicate. To Corinthicate, or to conquer around, in classical times, meant to have an ostentatious, licentious, cosmopolitan lifestyle. If you want to imagine Corinth, even if you've never been to Corinth, I'm sure you can all imagine Soho, or in fact even Leith, a place which is both glamorous and seedy, wealthy and suffering from poverty. And it's to Corinth that Paul goes. He doesn't just go there. He stays there for 18 months with Priscilla and Aquila, her husband. And he works as a tent maker. Now, in some ways that's quite a humble thing to be doing, but I mentioned Corinth was a naval power. Who uses tents? Armies. This wasn't like the Jewish people wandering in the desert needing tents. It was military procurement. And also, Paul stays with a woman. It's the woman that he singles out as being the person that has encouraged him, and helped him, and employed him. He's there at the time when there's a chap called Gallio, the brother of the philosopher Seneca. Seneca was immensely rich. He was tutor to Nero. Don't quite know if that's educational advantage that we taught Nero. But Gallio was the governor. The most important thing is that Paul writes at least 2 letters to the Corinthians once he leaves. And in fact, Priscilla and Aquila will join him in his later travels. He might actually have written 4 letters. In 1 Corinthians he says, I wrote to you before about this. And in 2 Corinthians he talks about his epistle of tears that he wrote to them. We don't have them. But to wrap all this up, Corinth wasn't an easy option for Paul. It was a tough gig. Christ said he came for sinners. And if someone was looking for sinners, then Paul would certainly have found plenty of them in Corinth. And unfortunately, they weren't all outside of the church. The epistles to the Corinthians contain some of the most moving, most poetic, most affecting passages in the Bible, particularly about love. And I think there's a certain irony that a city which had so many temple prostitutes, Paul is saying, it's love, faith, hope, and love. That love is patient, that love is not quick to temper. When Paul writes to them, his first and foremost concern is dissension in the church. He's grieved that some say, oh, I follow Paul, and some say, I follow Peter, Cephas, or I follow Silas. minister at the end of the week is going to say, well, I follow Jesus. As if they're getting a bit of one-upmanship in. So it's important here that Paul is saying, right, enough of this dissension. That's why the central affirmation of the book is of Christ crucified, and that the greatest of these is love. It's also important that there are two epistles. There are two epistles to the Thessalonians, but there's no second Galatians or second Ephesians. Paul cared for that church there. He's writing to them frequently, even if he had to have sharp as well as encouraging words. And he does it with genuine humility. Now, Paul was a clever man, a bit like Elder P. Derrick. But he says at the outset, quoting Isaiah, I will destroy the wisdom of the wise. He refers to God making foolish the wisdom of the wise. And that the message of salvation is to the Greeks foolishness and a stumbling block to the Jews. And today's reading reasserts this. What eye has not seen, nor ear heard, nor mind has conceived. Paul's writing to a place that thought was intellectually superior, and that was paramount, and where the church is riven with factions, each saying they have figured out what the true truth is. His response? It's love, not being smart, that matters. Paul stood out as Christ commanded. His light was not hidden. He knew the truth of those words of Jesus. Unless your righteousness surpasses that of the Pharisees and the teachers of the law, you will not enter the kingdom of heaven. And remember, Paul had been one of the Pharisees. Following Christ eventually is about doing rather than cogitating or speculating. Isaiah knew that in the passage that I read. Paul knew that. Jesus taught that. Now we, facing an uncertain future in our churches, just as Corinth was, might care to reflect on foregoing procedures and protocols and the IVs and of course we used to do such and such a thing, and think more about going out and doing. Paul could have quite happily stayed at home, but no, he went out to the world, and that is what we are asked to do as well. Amen. We're going to sing hymn 159. Lord, the years your love has kept and guided.
Yes.
Lord, we dedicate our gifts and their giving, and to those whom they are given, who gave so much to us. Let us be brave enough to give more of ourselves, of our time, and of our talents, each day and every day. Amen. For our prayers of intercession, I will end each section saying, Lord, in your mercy. And if you want to join in and say, hear our prayer, I'd be glad of that. Lord, we raise to you our prayers for the world. This world is bruised and brutalized by our malevolence and our apathy, by inconsideration and deliberate hatred. You started your earthly ministry by healing, and we beseech you to pour your mercy onto this damaged and ravaged world. Although especially we pray for Ukraine and the conflict there, let us not forget everywhere else, from Turkey to Yemen, from China to Mexico, from Israel-Palestine to the United States, to our own back doors, where violence is becoming normal and hope a dream. Lord, in your mercy, hear our prayers. Lord, we raise to you our prayers for the church. We all feel the pang of empty pews. But give us the courage to take your message beyond these walls. We all struggle with changes, but change us to be truly missional, true instruments of grace, and to speak your truth openly. We place into your care the moderator of the Church of Scotland as he goes to South Sudan, and you, beleaguered and Christian country, along with other faith leaders. Lord, in your mercy, hear our prayers. Lord, we raise to you our prayers for those who wield influence, be they politicians or personalities, those with platforms or wealth or power. Instill in them a sense of consequence and responsibility, a desire to make things better rather than to cling to their own privilege. Lord, we ask that all those in authority are gifted consciences. Lord, in your mercy, hear our prayers. Lord, we raise to you all those who are sick, in need, in desperation. Give to them comfort, if not of the body or the mind, but of the soul. We think especially of those who are undermined by poverty, stricken by illness, and prey to melancholy. We name now in silence those who we know in particular, who we feel require our prayers and your grace. Lord, in your mercy, hear our prayers. Lord, we raise to you our memories of the dead, those who we firmly believe are now in your closer presence. Comfort all those who grieve, be with those who struggle with loss, and stay with those whose road approaches its destination. Lord, in your mercy, hear our prayers. Amen. We are going to sing hymn 221, Saviour again, to thy dear name we raise. With you behind us, nothing ahead of us need frighten us. So we go now, and the blessing of God, Father, Son, and Spirit, remain with us as sustain us this day